Okay, let's unpack this. When we explore history, we usually talk about, technology, politics, empires. But today, we're going much deeper to something that underpins all of it. The moment the self, the individual, became a real, explicit part of the written record. We're talking about the beginning of authorship.
And it's so important to frame this right because, we have massive texts that are older.
Right, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Everyone knows Gilgamesh.
Exactly. But those are anonymous. They come from a collective tradition, a kind of mythic fog. We don't know who wrote them.
So the shift we're tracking is when a single person consciously put her name, her personal story, her own voice onto a piece of writing for the first time. And that person is Enheduanna. She lived around 2285 to 2250 BCE, and she's the world's first identifiable author. That's our mission today, to figure out why her life right there in Mesopotamia was this pivot point. The moment human expression went from anonymous tradition to individual art.
And what's so fascinating when you dig in is that she wasn't some isolated artist. Her writing was completely tied to her immense political and religious power. She was a princess, a high priestess, a literary pioneer, all at once. Her writing was, in a very real sense, a tool of the state. It was infrastructure.
That really raises the stakes. Okay, so to get her, we first have to get the world she was born into. And that means starting with her father, Sargon of Akkad. He's the one who established history's first real empire.
Sargon's reign changed everything. This is around 2334 BCE. Before him, Mesopotamia was just this collection of warring city-states, Uruk, Kish, always fighting. Sargon didn't just conquer them, he unified them under a single Akkadian rule. I mean, it stretched from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean, a completely new reality.
But military power gets you the land. Keeping an empire of different cultures together, that's a whole other problem. How did he deal with that huge gap between his Akkadian north and the ancient Sumerian south?
And that is where you see his genius. The conquest had to be followed by a very sophisticated cultural synthesis. He knew he couldn't just rule by force. He had to find a way to make these two identities, Sumerian and Akkadian, coexist, to blend them into one imperial culture.
And his daughter, Enheduanna, she was the key to that whole strategy.
Precisely. Sargon appoints her to the single most powerful religious job in the entire Sumerian south, the position of Priestess of the moon god Nanna in the city of Ur. This was a brilliant, deliberate piece of political theater. He's channeling the power of his new Akkadian regime right through the heart of the old Sumerian religious establishment.
When we say priestess, we shouldn't be thinking of someone quietly praying. This was a position of serious administrative power.
Oh, immense power. It was the highest office a woman could hold, and it was anything but ceremonial. The Priestess controlled huge temple estates, which were basically economic engines. They managed farms, trade, huge numbers of workers, and beyond that, she had this undeniable spiritual authority. She influenced state policy through divination, through her connection to the gods.
So putting his own daughter, an Akkadian, in this top Sumerian job, that wasn't just integration. It was a power move.
A very calculated one. It forced the old Sumerian elite to accept his rule through their own faith. Sargon's bloodline was now literally running their most sacred institution.
And she was ready for it. She was educated for this role.
Absolutely. Born to Sargon and Queen Teshlutum, she got the best education possible. She was fluent in the cuneiform writing system, which was incredibly complex. And crucially, she mastered Sumerian, even though her native language was Akkadian. Just being that literate put her at the absolute peak of the intellectual elite.
Her name itself seems to signal that. Enheduanna.
It does. It's a Sumerian name that translates to something like High Priestess, ornament of the sky. It's a direct link to her celestial authority, to the moon god Nanna. It says she was ordained by heaven and appointed by the empire.
But even with a king for a father and a divine title, it wasn't a smooth ride. This cultural blending experiment had to create some friction.
It did. Her authority was definitely contested. At some point during the reign of her brother, or maybe her nephew, the sources are a bit debated there, she was violently kicked out of Ur. A rebellious Sumerian priest named Lugal-ain led the coup. It was the old guard trying to take back power.
To be stripped of all that, the wealth, the influence, the spiritual power, it must have been a terrifying and humiliating experience.
Absolutely. She went from being the most powerful woman in the world to a political exile. But this is the key. This period of crisis, of upheaval, it became the crucible for her greatest literary work. She took that personal trauma and turned literature into her weapon to fight back.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because she moves from pure politics into, well, theological innovation. Yeah. Let's talk about what she actually wrote.
Her masterpiece is the Exaltation of Inanna. It's a 153-line poem in Sumerian, and it's a breathtaking piece of work. It's a personal lament, a political statement, and a theological revolution all in one.
So hymns already existed. What was the big literary shift here? What did she do that was so different?
It was the personal voice, the I. Before Enheduanna, religious texts spoke for the community or for the king. She writes explicitly in the first person. She says things like, "Me, the woman who in the holy shrine have been exalted." She's putting her individual identity and her personal connection to the divine at the very center of the text. That's her claim to authority.
So she's not just praising a goddess, she's making the poem itself a legal argument, saying her power is real and personal because it comes directly from the heavens.
Exactly. And that leads to her second big move in this poem, the theological overhaul. She takes the goddess Inanna, who the Akkadians called Ishtar, and promotes her. She elevates her from a local deity into a supreme cosmic power.
Which sounds like a genius way to serve her father's imperial goals. How did she actually do that? How do you promote a god?
She used this concept of the me. The me in their cosmology were these divine powers that governed everything in civilization. Things like kingship, writing, justice, war. And what Enheduanna does in her poem is she claims Inanna now possesses all of the me. She basically strips the other gods of their unique powers and channels everything through Inanna.
Wow. So that's functionally unifying the entire pantheon. If Inanna holds the keys to everything from war to writing, then the Akkadian Sumerian Empire has a single, massive, unifying religious figurehead.
Precisely. It's solving a political problem with poetic theology. By elevating Inanna, she creates this perfect cultural bridge for the empire.
And the writing itself was just on another level for its time.
Oh, incredibly sophisticated. She uses complex metaphors, vivid, almost violent imagery. She describes Inanna as a dragon, an Anzu bird, a lion. This isn't dry stuff, it's powerful, forceful poetry.
And her own exile, that trauma, it fueled this new kind of lament.
Yes. Her description of being deposed, it sets the template for religious lament for thousands of years. She writes that her fruitful bed was reduced to dust. That link between personal security and cosmic disorder for an agricultural society would have been devastatingly powerful.
The kind of first-person cry to a deity sounds so familiar. It feels like the Psalms in the Bible. Like she's inventing a whole new way for humans to express emotion in text.
She absolutely is. And you see this ambition even more clearly in her other major work, the Temple Hymns. This was a collection of 42 hymns, one for each major temple across both Sumer and Akkad. It's the first known attempt to systematically map out the sacred geography of an entire empire.
42 temples, all tied together in one literary project. That's a huge undertaking.
A monumental feat of organization. But it's the final hymn that contains the real bombshell for history, the aha moment.
The revolutionary signature.
Yes. She ends the whole collection with this clear, undeniable claim of authorship. She writes, "The compiler of the tablets was En-hedu-anna. My king, something has been created that no one has created before."
Wow. That line gives me chills. She's not just signing her name, she's claiming creative genius. She's saying, I made this, and it's new.
It's the cognitive leap. She understood that what she was doing wasn't just transcribing old stories, it was creation, it was intellectual property. And the incredible thing is we have hard physical proof that she was real.
Right. Let's get to the archaeology. How do we know all this for sure?
Well, in 1927, the archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley was digging in and he found it, the disc of Enheduanna.
What exactly is it? What does it show us?
It's this alabaster disc about 10 inches across with a detailed carving. And the carving shows Enheduanna in her full ritual robes and headdress leading a religious ceremony. And crucially, the inscription on it clearly identifies her by name and title.
So it's the first known portrait of an author, identified by name, linked directly to her powerful office. It makes her completely real.
It literally grounds her in history. The disc proves that the woman who wrote those revolutionary lines was a real, powerful figure at the very center of the world's first empire.
Let's talk about her legacy then. She chose to write in Sumerian, even though Akkadian was the language of the empire. What was the impact of that choice?
Massively consequential. By writing these foundational religious texts in Sumerian, she basically turned it into a classical holy language, kind of like Latin would become centuries later. She ensured it was preserved and canonized.
In her theology, you said she pioneered religious syncretism as an imperial tool.
She did. Linking Sumerian Inanna with Akkadian Ishtar created that unified cult. And this method of merging the gods of conquered peoples with your own became standard practice for empires for the next 2,000 years. The Assyrians, the Romans, they all did it. She wrote the playbook.
And those literary echoes, you mentioned the Psalms, are the parallels really that strong?
They're very strong. The structure of personal lament, the first person addressed to a god, the raw emotional plea. Scholars see a direct line from her poetry to later biblical traditions. Her works were so important that scribes were still copying them by hand almost 500 years after she died.
500 years. That's an incredible lifespan for any ancient text. And her story also just completely reshapes how we think about women in the ancient world.
It has to. Her existence demolishes any simple idea that elite women were just powerless. Yes, it was a patriarchal world, but her role shows that women could wield authority, economic, political, spiritual, that was often equal to that of kings.
Though, as her exile shows, that power could always be challenged.
It was challenged, but her response is what defines her. She used words, not armies, to reclaim her power. She used literature and theology, and that's a testament to her genius. By elevating a complex goddess like Inanna, a goddess of love and war, creation and destruction, she created a divine model for powerful, nuanced female agency.
So what does this all mean? Enheduanna starts as a political pawn, but she turns that role into the foundation of literature as we know it. She achieves immortality by being the first person to consciously attach her name, herself, to the written word.
It really is this huge cognitive leap, the explicit recognition of individual creativity. She knew she was doing something new, and she signed her name to it. She understood that writing could preserve not just facts, but identity and emotion across millennia.
A foundational moment when a human mind realized its own power to create and demanded credit.
It is. And here's the final thought for you to chew on. This idea of hers, of explicit individual authorship, it flourishes with her. But then, for the most part, it vanishes from literature for over 1,000 years. It doesn't really reemerge in a big way until the ancient Greeks. So think about this. What cultural and political forces have to come together for a society to value individual creative genius enough to name it and preserve it? And why did that revolutionary idea, once it was invented, take another 1,000 years to finally stick? That's the question her legacy leaves us with.